So begin first of all by adjusting your motivation, thinking that we aspire to reach the state of highest complete state of Buddhahood in order to benefit all mother sentient beings who are as vast as the vastness of space. Since we have the aspiration to reach that complete state of Buddhahood, we come here to participate in this event in order to listen, to train and contemplate. But also we should make the firm commitment that whatever we listen and we understand, we will actually carry it through as a practice. Having, first of all, generated the mind of conventional bodhicitta and allowed this to influence our mind, we begin with the actual training of the bodhisattvas, which is the practice of equalizing and exchanging self for others. So far, we have covered the section of the text that deals with how to bring unfavorable conditions, unfavorable situations into the path as a practice. We will continue now with the two following verses. The first one is how to give up attachment for attractive objects, and the second one is how to view unfavorable conditions and circumstances when they actually occur. So we begin with the first one, how to give up attachment for desirable objects. Verse 23, when you encounter attractive objects, though they seem beautiful, like a rainbow in summer, don't regard them as real and give up attachment. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. So previously, well, a couple of verses earlier, we had the advice that it is very important for us to abandon and distance ourselves straight away from attractive objects, because immediately afflictions and particularly attachment is generated. However, the advice that is given at this point to simply distance yourself from these objects is a practice that will allow you to deal only with manifest afflictions, but it doesn't go deeper. Here with this verse, the advice that we are given is that we should treat all those attractive objects as if they were illusory. There is therefore a great connection between the previous verse and this verse, because this verse actually gives us the tools to address the problem of attachment for desirable objects all the way down to the seed. So the advice is that we should view those objects as rainbows appearing in the sky. So when a rainbow appears in the sky, somehow we have this great hope, this great expectation that we will come near to the rainbow. Somehow we will touch the rainbow, this will satisfy us and so forth. But actually the nearer we come to the rainbow, the more we realize that this is something unachievable, untouchable. This is something that cannot justify us. And this beautiful appearance has been established just because there was a particular combination of the sun and the rain and things like that, of conditions, right? So it is like this with all of those attractive objects. They are mistaken appearances. However, from our side, we think that there is something solid from the side of this object. I can touch this object, I will utilize this object, and when I utilize this object, I will enjoy it. But the reality is that when we actually interact with this object, the mind remains unsatisfied. And this, right, that thing there proves that there is a great disparity between the way the thing exists and the way that the things appear. So that's why we use here the analogy of the rainbow. It looks so beautiful, it should be so satisfying, but actually it's not something that exists in any concrete way and it can give you satisfaction like this. So dealing with this attractive phenomena as being similar to illusions and rainbows, then the practice of the bodhisattvas is to give up attachment and craving for these types of objects. So we continue now with the following verse, verse 24. All forms of suffering are like a child's death in a dream. Holding illusory appearances to be true makes you wary. Therefore, when you meet with disagreeable circumstances, see them as illusory. This is the practice of Bodhisattva. So this verse particularly deals with how we should think about suffering, the different types of suffering when we encounter it. And of course the advice here is that all these suffering should be treated as illusory. The suffering here could be the suffering of being separated from that which is desirable, pleasant, or the suffering of meeting with that which is unpleasant, the suffering of sickness, of aging, and death, and so forth. All types of different types of suffering. So it says all of this should be treated like a child's death in a dream. As the sutra states, imagine that there is a young woman who desires to have a child. And one night she has a dream that she has given birth to the child. And then she has this incredible joy for having given birth to a child. Then on another night, she dreams that the child has died, and this incredible sorrow torments her mind. But in reality, neither the birth of the child that gave so much happiness was true, it was just a dream, and similarly, the death of the child that created so much sorrow in the mind, again, that was not true. It only occurred in a dream. So whatever appears to us, whatever suffering we perceive, only appears as existing due to the imprints that we have in our mind. So the imprints of our mind create these illusions, create those appearances that those things actually exist. And therefore we have all these mistaken appearances of suffering. So when suffering occurs, the practitioner has to recognize that these things are not true and look at all these various types of suffering just as something that occurs in a dream, something that is totally illusory. So this is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. So we have seen here how we receive advice on how to treat the objects of our attachment and also the objects of our aversion. Things such as the friend and the enemy are not things that are established inherently, truly from their own side. They are only established interdependently. And therefore, from our side, we need to recognize this aspect of their nature. Due to the imprints of true existence, they appear to us as being existent, as being established as independently, truly existent, but we should certainly think of them as being mistaken appearances and illusory in nature. And this helps to minimize our attachment and our aversion. All right, so now we continue with the remaining section of the text. The remaining section of the text is organized in 5 outlines. So we will have a section where we will mention the practicing or training in the 6 perfections. Then we examine our own errors and abandon them. We do not mention the faults of Mahayana practitioners. We give up attachment for the house of the relatives and sponsors. We give up harsh words. We destroy afflictions as soon as they arise. And then we have the brief explanation of how to accomplish the benefit of others, and with mindfulness and alertness, and finally we have a dedication. So really we have to go through all these sections to complete the text. So we begin with verse 25. We are now in the section of practicing in the 6 perfections, beginning with the practice of generosity. So when those who want enlightenment must give even their body, there is no need to mention external things. Therefore, without hope of return or any fruition, give generously. This is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. So those who wish to obtain the state of perfect and complete enlightenment engage in the practice of the 6 perfections, beginning with the practice of generosity. When they practice generosity, they are willing and determined to give, practice generosity even with their own body, which is so precious and so difficult to give. So if they are willing to practice generosity with their body, is there any need to mention that, of course, they will practice generosity with all other material possessions, right? Like the house, the car, the wealth, the wife, the children, everything that they have, everything that they possess, they are ready to offer this as a practice of generosity. This practice of generosity, as it says here, should never be done with an afterthought of reward or an afterthought of a maturational result. Like, if I give this now, there will be something good, a nice result waiting for me. It should never be done like this. It should be done purely with the attitude of giving in order to establish the benefit of others, because we are seeking to reach the state of enlightenment. It is very interesting to see that, of course, when we enter into the Mahayana, we see that the essence of the Mahayana is to cultivate love and compassion and cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. And when we take the Bodhisattva vows, there are certain things that are, let's say, highlighted or obviously actually spoken out to us, and our attention is drawn to those things, saying this is important, you have to train in this. But also indirectly, we have to understand that there are so many other practices that are also very important, right? So even if they are not always directly mentioned, there are so many practices that are important for the Mahayana practitioner. So here we say that engaging in acts of generosity without completely any wish for reward is the practice. So we mentioned here that we need to come to the point of offering everything that we possess, the house, the possessions, our wealth, even our body. And in the beginning, this seems to be something that is very difficult to practice, is very difficult to do. However, as Master Shantideva says in Bodhisattva's Ways of Life, there is nothing that does not become easier through practice and familiarity. So even though in the beginning it might seem very difficult, there are ways of training to make it easier for us. The reason why we cannot actually give material things is due to our stinginess. And this stinginess comes due to attachment. So to overcome this, we have to consider that at the time of death, all of these material possessions are things that we have to leave behind. It is not as if we could carry any of this in the next life. So if we cannot take it with us, and if we have to part with these possessions at the end of the life, why don't we train ourselves to give them up before we actually arrive at the time of death? And of course, initially when you hear that, oh, I have to practice generosity even with my own body, that seems to be, again, another level of difficulty. But at the time of death, even that body that we cherish and we rely upon to so much, even this is something that we have to give away. Therefore, gradually, we need to train the mind in this attitude that is willing to give. In terms of generosity, there are 3 types of generosity. Generosity of Dharma. So this actually refers to giving teachings and instructions and so forth. All of those have to be given with the right motivation, always with the intention to benefit others. We then have material generosity that refers to giving everything that we possess, we enjoy, and our root of virtue over the 3 times. Again, we dedicate it for the benefit of others. And finally, we have the generosity of fearlessness that refers to protection, protecting the lives of others. So very often we see the conflict and the war comes from this attitude of differentiating and having parts and saying, this is us and this is them. And when the division arises, we see that hostility and war can arise, and we can rejoice when our enemies lose their lives and so forth. So it's actually very good if we could pray that there is always peace between conflicting parts and that the wars and such divisions are purified. This is an excellent practice. The next one, verse 26, is about the practice of ethics. Without ethics, you cannot accomplish your own well-being. So wanting to accomplish others is laughable. Therefore, without worldly aspirations, safeguard your ethical discipline. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So here we're talking about having the ethics of individual liberation and other different types of vows. If we are not able to maintain the vows of individual liberation, we will not be able to, of course, obtain our own purpose. We will not be able to obtain a rebirth, a good rebirth as a human or a god. And if we end up in a situation of taking rebirth in the hells or in any of the lower migrations, not only are we not in a position to establish our own benefit, but it will be laughable. It doesn't make any sense to think that we will be able to establish the benefit of other sentient beings. How could we do this from the hells? Therefore, without having any aspiration whatsoever for the marvelous states that exist within cyclic existence, it is important to cultivate ethics whilst we are influenced by the mind of Bodhichitta. So, as the author of the text highlights here, everything depends upon having the wish to cherish others. So with this wish to cherish others, training and safeguarding your ethical discipline becomes the practice of Bodhisattvas. Okay, we're talking about the practice of ethics. There are 3 aspects of practicing in ethics in morality. The first one is establishing morality. The second one is the ethics of avoiding negative actions. And the third one is the morality of establishing the benefit of sentient beings. And this actually is more or less presented or accepted in all religious systems. And all religious systems say that if you carry out an ethical life, then things will go well, you will progress well. If you do not carry out an ethical life, then things will start going bad. Especially here, we note the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. All of us wishes to experience happiness. So everyone who wishes to experience happiness needs to train in morality in accordance with the Dharma. So in this way, we establish the ethics of avoiding negativity. And then with this particular attitude, with a virtuous attitude, we engage in certain activities such as making offerings, make prostrations, circumambulations, and things like this. And we establish virtuous activity, and we work for the benefit of others. We continue with the next practice, which is the practice of patience. Verse 27, 2 Bodhisattvas who want a wealth of virtue, those who harm are like a precious treasure. Therefore, towards all, cultivate patience without hostility. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So it says here, bodhisattvas who want to have a wealth of virtue. The wealth of virtue refers to accumulating vast amount of merit. And if you want to work for the benefit of others, you actually require that vast amount of merit. So those bodhisattvas who wish to have a great amount of merit, they have a particular way of viewing the enemies, or those who arise or behave in the manner of an enemy. So they see the enemy as a method for accumulating this vast amount of merit. Therefore, they view the enemy like a great treasure. So without any animosity and without any hostility at all, they practice patience towards the enemies. This is the practice of the Mahayana, the Bodhisattva practitioners. Okay, so we see here that it says that if we, entering the middle way, the text says there's no negativity like the lack of patience. And why do we say this? We say this because we say that when we meet with the person that appears to be an enemy to us, is like meeting a treasure. It's meeting a treasure in the sense that this person allows us to accumulate all the necessary merit that is required. So why be hostile? Why be angry towards this? If we become angry towards the enemy, then we are destroying the method that is otherwise will be the method that would give us all the merit that we required. So it's like turning a medicine into poison. Also, Bodhisattva's ways of life says there is no austerity like patience. There's no negativity like anger. Why do we say that this is the case? Because we say that patience is like a treasure. Patience allows us to create a situation where we can accumulate a lot of merit, so there is great benefit for us. But if we become angry at that person or that situation, we just destroy this opportunity, and in the process we accumulate a vast amount of negativity. So indeed it is the case of turning the medicine into poison. And therefore, we should always consider the great benefits of cultivating patience and all the faults that come with anger. So through this comparison, hopefully, we should be able to keep anger at bay. It is very important to address anger at the very beginning and try to stop it the moment it arises. And the way we can achieve this is by recollecting all the faults of anger. If we do not make the effort to stop anger at the beginning, later on it will be very difficult. And when anger becomes the usual way of operating, then it will be very difficult. It will be impossible in our life to change this. And therefore, if we look at the different types of patience here, there is patience of not retaliating. There is patience of willingly accepting the situation, and there is patience towards the Dharma. So the first one, the patience of not wishing to retaliate, is the patience that allows our minds to remain undisturbed. So we do not take into account. Someone does something, and you say, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to this. I am not going to retaliate in this. The second one is the patience of willingly accepting negativity, because we understand that when a difficult situation arises, this willingly accepting the difficulties, because we understand that when this happens, this is a way of purifying our negativity. So indeed, it is a situation of having met with a treasure. We have the good fortune of meeting with a situation that minimizes our negativity. So Rinpoche was saying, really, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to request you that you do take this as your practice. You make the commitment to overcome anger and to cultivate patience. Many times people would say, oh, where does it say in the text that this is a commitment? It's not a commitment. I don't have this as a commitment. But if you go down this line, at the end, there's no practice. You don't commit to any practice. Of course, it is very difficult for us because since beginningless time, we have familiarity, great familiarity with anger, but we must make the promise that we will take this as our practice, and we say, from today onwards, I will start with this. So I will start thinking about the benefits of patience and all the shortcomings that come to anger. There is absolutely no benefit in this situation. If I become angry, there is only loss in this situation. So Rinpoche says, please, I urge you, make the commitment that this is your practice from today. Rinpoche again stated that from his side he considers this practice, the practice of cultivating patience, to be the most crucial practice. And he says, please, I urge you, make the commitment, make the promise. In my eyes, this is the most important practice. If you lack this, there's no substance to your practice. We continue to the next one, which is enthusiastic effort, verse 28. Seeing even hearers and solitary realizers who accomplish only their own good, strive as if to put out a fire on their head, for the sake of all beings, make enthusiastic effort, the source of all good qualities. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So, as it is praised in Entering the Middle Way, enthusiastic effort is truly the source of all good qualities. So thinking that I'm seeking to develop these good qualities, not just for me, but in order to benefit all sentient beings, see enthusiastic effort, which is defined as delight in virtue, as very important for developing, very important for the Mahayana practitioner, for the Bodhisattvas. In terms of enthusiastic effort, we have three types or three aspects of enthusiastic effort. The first one is the armor-like enthusiastic effort, which means that due to your compassion, due to your bodhicitta, you are not discouraged at all. So as the verse says, even if I had to spend hundreds of eons in the deepest hell of Avicii, for the sake of each and every sentient being, bless me not to be discouraged. So this is the type of armor of enthusiastic effort that allows you to continue for the benefit of others. The second one is the enthusiastic effort in terms of virtuous activities. So delight in engaging in virtuous activities, such as making offerings, prostrations, and so forth. And the last one is the insatiable enthusiastic effort, which refers to continuous or tireless energy for the sake of others. So we talk a lot about enthusiastic effort, and we need to understand that what actually stops us from generating this enthusiastic effort is laziness. And there are three different types of laziness. The first one is the laziness of procrastination. The second one is the laziness of being attracted to frivolous, meaningless activities. And the third one is the laziness of putting yourself down. The first one, the laziness of procrastination, is actually a very serious case, because this is the one that makes us think, oh, I will practice virtue, but, tomorrow, a little bit later on, just the next week I'm starting, and so forth. And this constant procrastination means that actually we never come to establish any actual virtue. To overcome this, it's very important to consider death and impermanence. The next one is being attracted to negative activities, because these frivolous negative activities, it takes away our energy. And the third one is the laziness that comes from putting ourselves down. And to overcome this, it's very important to consider how we have obtained the precious human rebirth. But even further than that, just consider that all of us have the Tathagata essence. And although we have this Tathagata essence, it's entirely within our own power. It's within our own hand to generate, to activate this. It's completely up to us to decide that I will be active, I will put things into practice, I will remove the afflictions. Afflictions are removable, they are not part of my essence. And also the mind of bodhicitta is something that can be generated. The state of omniscience is something that is attainable. And when you see that you have the Tathagata essence, in actuality, you see the nature of all things. And you see this ultimate state of equality. It really comes down to deciding that I can generate a virtue state of mind. I can generate virtue, I can benefit others, I can reduce, I can eliminate all my afflictions and the 3 types of poisons. We continue with the next one, which is the practice of cultivating concentration. Verse 29, understanding that disturbing emotions are destroyed by special insight with calm abiding, cultivate concentration, which surpasses the 4 formless absorptions. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So we see that mere concentration is not capable of eliminating afflictions. Instead, we need to cultivate the equipoise of calm abiding, and from within that state of calm abiding also generate special insight that directly realizes emptiness. This is the one that has the power to destroy all afflictions. So this is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. We continue with the next one, which is training in the perfection of wisdom, verse 13. Since the 5 perfections without wisdom cannot bring perfect enlightenment, along with skillful means cultivate the wisdom which does not conceive the 3 spheres as real. This is the practice of the Bodhisattva. The first 5 perfections must be complemented by the last one, which is the perfection of wisdom that directly realizes emptiness. We see that the great means that we have, such as the great compassion and the bodhicitta, those things alone, although they are very skillful, they cannot give us the final result. They must be combined with the perfection of wisdom. So cultivating this non-conceptual realization of emptiness is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. So the question here is that having practiced the first of 5 perfections, is it possible to reach the state of highest complete enlightenment? The answer to this is no. Just the first 5 perfections cannot give us this result. However, influenced by or supported by the previous 5 perfections, finally we train in the 6th perfection, which is the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, our perfection of wisdom must be influenced from the previous 5, and the previous 5 must be influenced by the perfection of wisdom. Having generated bodhicitta, we have merely entered the ranks of the Mahayana, but we will not go beyond the middle path of accumulation. And therefore, to reach all the way to the state of perfect, complete enlightenment, it is absolutely necessary to unite method and wisdom. Separate practices of method and wisdom will not lead to this result. And therefore, the root of the Mahayana practice that leads to complete enlightenment is the union of method and wisdom. So, having completed the presentation of the verses for training in the 6 perfections. We continue with the next sections, which is examining our own mistakes and abandoning them, don't mentioning faults of Mahayana practitioners, giving up attachment for the house of relatives and sponsors, and giving up harsh words. All right, so we continue with verse 31. If you do not examine your own errors, you may look like a practitioner but not act as one. Therefore, always examining your own errors, rid yourself of them. This is the practice of the Bodhisattva. So it is a very important practice for the Bodhisattva practitioner to always examine for one's own mistakes. So it is almost like something which is very obvious. With alertness and conscientiousness, we should really examine. We have taken a lot of vows, such as vows of individual liberation, bodhisattva vows, tantric vows. We have made the commitment to abandon the 10 non-virtuous actions, and so forth. And if we do not examine carefully with alertness and conscientiousness what is happening in our mind, we will not have the opportunity to abandon these mistakes. Therefore, it is an important practice. It is actually very difficult for us to recognize and see our own mistakes. So Rinpoche was making the joke, like, so imagine that you have snot coming out of your own nose, right? And you're not aware of it because you cannot see your own face. And then you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, and suddenly you're horrified because you see what's happening, and immediately you try to wipe it away, or, you're so embarrassed, you want to disappear. So it's difficult for us to see our own mistakes. And for this reason, we should constantly examine the activities of our 3 doors, our motivation, and so on. Are these things in accordance with the Dharma or not? Here we are reciting all these prayers with such wonderful words and such great aspirations, but is this really in accordance with the motivation that we have or not? If we examine and we find that we have a mistake, we should immediately take the action to remedy the situation, to get rid of this mistake. It's like, immediately you wash your face, you wipe everything away, isn't it? It is like the great Kadampa Geshes, who would have a way of counting every day, how much negativity, how many mistakes are made. And then at the end of the day, you see like a great accumulation of the number of mistakes, right? So it's important to look at our mistakes and abandon them, address all these mistakes. That's the practice of the Bodhisattvas. So we continue with the next practice of the Bodhisattvas, which is not mentioning the faults of those who have entered the great vehicle. Verse 32. If through the influence of disturbing emotions you point out the faults of another Bodhisattva, of those who have entered the great vehicle, this is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So it is... it can happen out of afflictions. We come under the influence of anger or jealousy and so forth, and we start criticizing and speaking about the faults of other beings. And in particular here, it refers to the case of speaking about the faults of bodhisattvas. We don't know who is a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva does not necessarily have the title of a lama or a geshe. A bodhisattva is not necessarily someone who is sitting up on a high throne. So you might, there are no external signs that will certainly tell you, oh, this person is a bodhisattva. So if you go around speaking about the faults of this person and that person and that person, actually there is the danger of criticizing bodhisattvas. And when this happens, our own virtue will decline. Therefore, the practice of the Mahayana practitioners is to stop talking about the faults of bodhisattvas and so forth, other beings, other practitioners who have entered the path. We just don't do this. It's not good to talk about the faults of other beings, and in particular, if we talk about faults of bodhisattvas, this becomes quite heavy negativity. So we should not be looking for faults of other people. We should just be concerned about the faults that we have in our own mind stream. So this is actually a very common occurrence, that instead of focusing on ourselves, we're constantly looking at faults and mistakes on others. And then we speak out and we criticize, we speak about these faults that we perceive. And when we do this, and it's possible that the person does not even have the mistake or the fault that we highlight, what happens is that our root of virtue declines. Their root of virtue does not decline because we point out their mistakes. Therefore, who is losing here in this situation? We lose because our root of virtue declines. If we take on the other attitude, which is, let me always examine my own faults. Do I have faults? Can I do something about my faults? Then my root of virtue increases. And instead, if I'm always preoccupied that does this person has this fault, does that person has that fault, then of course that causes my root of virtue to decline. So we have to be very careful and in general not criticize, not speak about the faults of others. That should be our way of operating, and just be very careful when we speak. The best thing is to cultivate pure appearances, see others as faultless, and be very careful, do not speak about the faults of others. We continue with the third of those 5 outlines towards the end, with verse 33. Reward and respect cause us to quarrel and make hearing, thinking, and meditation decline. For this reason, give up attachment to the households of friends, relations, and benefactors. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So this verse highlights here how important it is to give up attachment for households of, let's say, friends, benefactors, and so forth. Because when we frequent places like this, of course, there is expression of respect. People would be generous, perhaps make gifts. There will be reward and things like this. But when we receive those things, these things often become the cause of quarrels and disagreements. And these cause our Dharma activities of hearing, thinking, and meditation to decline. And for this reason, the practice of the Bodhisattvas is to abandon the household of friends and benefactors. We continue with the 4th outline, is on verse 34. Harsh words disturb the minds of others and cause deterioration in a bodhisattva's conduct. Therefore, give up harsh words, which are unpleasant to others. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So consider here the situation where you're addressing someone and you use very harsh language towards them. So obviously, when the other person hears these words, their mind becomes disturbed. They are wounded, right? They are harmed by this type of verbal expression. And in terms of our bodhisattva training, to cause this type of harm and upset actually causes a deterioration, a decline of our bodhisattva contact. And therefore, for this reason, we should abandon completely using this type of language. We'll continue with the next section on verse 35. Habitual disturbing emotions are hard to stop through counteractions. Armed with antidotes, the guards of mindfulness and mental alertness destroy disturbing emotions like attachment at once, as soon as they arise. This is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. So the very important message here is that the practice of the Mahayana practitioners is to make sure that they abandon afflictions. And these afflictions must be abandoned or must be counteracted immediately as soon as we become aware that they arise. So immediately we should try to apply the antidote. And when we do this, we rely on 2 aspects of the mind, mindfulness and alertness. So they will give us information of the nature of the antidote and is the antidote generated in the mind or not? right? So we will get those pointers, those indicators of, do I have the antidote? Am I applying the antidote correctly? So it's very crucial, as we mentioned also before, that when we're dealing with afflictions, we should not allow afflictions to fester, to remain for a long time. Like, we should not become familiar, we should not become friendly with these afflictions, because the longer they remain in our mind, the harder it becomes to counteract them. And after a while, it seems impossible to counteract them. And therefore, it says immediately, rely on mindfulness and mental alertness and apply the antidote in order to destroy those inner enemy of afflictions. So again, the message here is that we should really try to apply the antidote as soon as possible and rely on mindfulness and mental alertness. As the Ornament of Sutra says, if you do not make the effort that it takes to counteract the afflictions, then you will lose your mind, because your mind will go into the direction of non-virtue. This will lead into suffering in this and future lives. Liberation and omniscience will become further and further goals. Your ethics as an ordained person will decline, and in this life you will only experience suffering and difficulties. What happens with afflictions such as the three poisons is that they are always on the lookout, and they're just waiting for an opportunity to take over our mind. So for that reason, we should always be alert. As Geshe Ben-Gungal said, my main practice is that I have to keep an eye on afflictions. When they are active and alert, I'm very alert. When they are relaxed, then I can also relax. So this shows how we should always be alert and be ready to apply the antidote and control our minds. As Bodhisattva's Ways of Life says, even if all humans and non-humans and gods and so forth were to arise as your enemy, the maximum damage they would cause is to harm your body and perhaps put an end to this life. However, they could not throw you into hell. If you give in to afflictions, not only will you experience great suffering in this life, but also by committing actions such as the 5 deeds of immediate retribution, these actions will drag you down to the hells. There is no other enemy who can do this to you other than your own afflictions. Understanding that afflictions are our enemies, always think about their faults and the mistakes that come from them, and apply mindfulness and mental alertness. So this actually takes effort, so make the effort to apply this. We come to verse 36, that is actually summarizing and expressing again that the practice of the Bodhisattvas is to accomplish the benefit of others. In brief, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, what is the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness and mental alertness, accomplish others' good. This is the practice of the Bodhisattvas. So the different stages of the training of the Bodhisattvas have been presented up to this point, and here they're all summarized. So it says, whatever you are doing, whether you live alone or whether you interact with society, always the practice of the Bodhisattvas is to examine your mind. Also, in the Bodhisattva's Ways of Life, we have similar verses which says, I should always examine my mind, and knowing what my mind and body is doing, always rely on mindfulness and alertness and work for the benefit of others. So whatever activity we might engage in, whether we think it's a Dharma activity, teaching, whether it is some secular activity, going to work, and so on and so forth, Whether this activity becomes Dharma or not entirely depends on the mind. So examining the mind, there are basically three mental states. It would either be positive or negative or a neutral state of mind. It is our ongoing practice that we have to guard the mind. By relying on mental alertness, we should continuously safeguard and protect the mind, control the mind. We come to the next verse 37, where now we begin with the dedication. To remove the suffering of limitless beings, understanding the purity of the three spheres, dedicate the virtue from making such effort to enlightenment. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. So having engaged in this training of bodhisattvas, we create roots of virtue, and this root of virtue should be dedicated for the benefit of all sentient beings, dedicated towards supreme enlightenment. But it should be done with an understanding of the three spheres, understanding that myself, who is doing the dedication itself, and the virtue that is dedicated is empty of inherent existence. So it is the practice of the bodhisattva with an understanding of the three spheres, the purity of the three spheres, to dedicate all the root of virtue for the sake of benefiting countless sentient beings. So, as the verse says, just as a single drop of water that is added to the great ocean is not exhausted until the entire ocean has evaporated, similarly, a root of virtue that is dedicated towards supreme enlightenment does not go to waste until the result of enlightenment is obtained. Therefore, it's very important that we do dedication. If we do not do dedication, there is always the danger of our virtue being destroyed by anger. As it is said, just as a seed that has been burned by fire cannot produce any result, similarly, our root of virtue is destroyed by anger and will not bring about the maturational result. Therefore, we should make sure that our virtue is not destroyed by anger, and make sure we safeguard it by dedicating properly. As I say, there are two activities, one at the beginning and one at the end, and the important activity at the end is dedication. Okay, so here we come to the concluding verses where the author explains why he have engaged in this composition. For all those who want to train on the Bodhisattva path, I have written the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, following what has been said by the excellent ones on the meaning of sutras, tantras, and treatises. The second verse following after that is the one that indicates that these practices are without mistake. Though not poetically pleasing to scholars, owing to my poor intelligence and lack of learning, I have relied in the sutras and the words of the excellent. So I think these bodhisattva practices are without errors. The third one is a verse that requires forgiveness or patience for any mistakes the author has done. So, however, as the great deeds of the bodhisattvas are hard to fathom for one of my poor intelligence, I beg the excellent to forgive all faults, such as contradictions and non sequiturs. The last verse is dedication towards supreme enlightenment of all this root of virtue. Through the virtue from this, may all living beings gain the ultimate and conventional altruistic intention, and thereby become like the protector Chenrezig, who dwells in neither extreme, not in the world, not in peace. And finally, the colophon by the author. This was written for his own and others' benefits by the monk Choeje, an exponent of scripture and reasoning in a cave in Nyulchu, Rinpoche. Okay, Rinpoche will give us the transmission of the text.
Choeje Zaba Tanja, I also doing Ziji Kungla Tanga Zimari.
We received at the beginning of the two verses, which is homage and the pledge of composition. These are not actually counted as the 37 in the 37 practices or verses.
Tenema Ziji, Tambo, Tenjo, Tunjiniga Tunde, Dajin Kuyi Sule Roji, Niedan Sendu Yewa Meba, Niesengamba Jese Lali. Nienji, Chulandu Chachudayo, Dayu Chula Shedam Medamba, London Jibi, Dimu Mendaj, Payu Bamba Jese Lali. Yunye Pambe, Nimu Rinjin Dre, Namye Mebe, Jungangi Be, Ribatambe, Chulangi Shechi, Yembatemba Jese Lali. Yunyen Dro Bian Zashe Soso Bebe Sabi no de Shudu Lujin Junga, Namshin Jumbu Pur, Sende Ludan Jese Lali. Kandu Rona Tusan Penjushin, Tusan Gambi Jawa Nyanju, Janda Niji Meba Chuba Ye, Tonge Bamba Jese Lali. Kashi Tena Nieva Senjushin, Yunde Yangun Dada Peju, Shinye Damba Rangi Lue Chang, Jivan Zimba Jese Lali. Raya Kuyi Tsunra Chimba Yenji Den Lai Sushi Javan, Tishi Kanla, Jamnam Livi Kunjo, Jambu Jese Lali. Shindu Suki Ngesun Dungena Dibi Legendre Tube Sun, Tishi Sola Paja Dibi, Naya Meji Jese Lali. Zison Dewa Tsatsi Sibajin, Yusam Shikin Jibi Chujin, Naya Menju Tabi Kubanj, Tunde Nyewa Jese Lali, Tome Tunde Dala Zawajin, Manu Dunala Nichi Jaha, Tishi Daya Sanji Roji, Shanju Sanji Jese Lali, Dunga Malu Daden Dole Jun, Zobe Sanji Jimbe Sende Chu, Tishi Dade Jinji Dunga Da Yanda Jewa Jese Lali, Sudan Dujin Wangi Rangi Noro Tanji Chogang Chodun Juna Yang, Ludan Nunju Tusan Gewa Na Dal, Tela Ngwa Jese Lali, Dala Nyeba Junse Meye Jindu Kanda, Dagi Ngo Jena Yang, Niji Wangi Ti Divana, Dala Lemba Jese Lali, Gashi Dala Menye Nazoba, Tunsa Cheba Toba Jena Yang, Chambi Sijena Yang Teniji, Dejuba Jese Lali, Roman Dubi Osun Gashi Ge, Sanen Ruji Tsi Nge Mana Tela Givi Shijin Tu Shiji, Kuben Dubara Jese Lali. Dagi Pijin Chiba Jami Me, Dala, Dashi, Tawa Jena Yang, Neji Tabi Pila Majin, Tabatsewa Jese Lali. Randa Nyamba Mebi Choeje, Ngaje Wangi Nyetawa Jena Yang, Lama Shindu Kube Daniji, Choe Lemba Jese Lali. Choeje Punshin Tatu Mei Ni, Tsabachen Netan Dunji Tabjan Har, Rogun Didu Dala Lenji Ji Shumba Meba Jese Lali. Nyamba Tashin Roma Choe Nandu Pi Nonda Tawa Jurja. Sibi Penjo Nyimbo Mezine, Kimba Meba Jese Lali. Rangi Shedan Dao Matuna, Shura Dao Tushin Pewanjur, Dichi Chandani Jimabungi, Ranjunduwa Jese Lali. Devi Yunde Nenji Lenzi Chudan Da Jisum Chijan, Siva Pewanjur Kala Lenza, Shinja Jibi Ngobona Trela Pama Jese Lali. Chedan Nawanda Da Rangi Sinye Dune Tribya Tadan, Teni Shene Zunze, Tsamanam Yila Meji Jese Lali. Yidu Unyi Yudan Chabana, Yaji, Duji, Jasun Jijindu, Zabana, Demermanda, Shinja Bamba Jese Lali, Dungenazo Melan Bishitar, Chuna, Dembasunya, Atanji, Tishimidu, China, Trebizi, Chubatawa Jese Lali, Shanchun Debe, Luja Tongona, Chirongobana, Mijigu, Tishi Lenda, Namemere, Jematonga Jese Lali, Sudumeba, Random Mendona, Jindun Jubandeba, Gimune, Tishi Sibin Dumba, Meba Yesunum, Suma Jeselani, Give Lunjun to be Jesel. Nujetam Jirin, Jetetan, Tishi Kula, Shindre Meba, Zabagamba Jeselani, Random Bashir to be Niraya, Bella, Gola, Misho Tota, Zondone, Dogun Tundu, Yundin Juneji, Sundu, Samba Jeselani, Shinaratan de Meladung. Nyumo namban jomba shijene zumi jila yanda deva yi samde gamba jese lane yi. Shira mena paro chenga yi zobe shanju taba minube tabda deje kosam mudobe shirab gamba jese lane yi. Rangi chuba rangi mata na chibe suji chime jesebe deje jundu rangi chuba la tane bawa jese lane yi. Nimuwangi jese chendaki nyebalina dani nyamjurbe, teba chela shube kanzaki nyebamema jese lani, nigo wangi pencha chunzhi, tosa gambe chawa nyamjurbe, zashi chinda jenda chinda la chaba pangwa jese lani, zumi tsige jinse chunjurshi, jiwe seji chusu nyamjurbe, deshi jenji yidu mungi tsisu pangwa jese lani, Nimu kana nyembe dokawe, 전시 집에 님비 수준에 자소 님은 당부 제마타 문정 제바 제셀라리 대인체들 제셀라네 순주
So,
만다 순주 소나 만들어마서 너나 간도 전랑 지제장 랑게 선지 내가 진다시 준도 전나 시제된 바이 연전 주바 제셀라리 대다서 준비 주비 제와나 타연도 예동에 세지 고산 넘버 답이 쉬어지 잔중어와 제셀라리 제셀라리 소등이 다 자와되는 소등 아마도 되죠 중간에
okay, so we have received now the transmission of the actual part of the text with the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. This is the root text.
도저 된전에 숨비도 담반한지 숨기지만에 제사 남지라는 숨주 제셀라 랑랑한데 된도 그 로저 미시 장바 중이시 개바지비 되죠 마치 도다 담비 손라 템비치 제세 추미 제셀라는 추미 라바선 자 제세 제바 랍제나 로메단데 팀바 가위치 게다 만들라서 니비수 담반나지 저반제도서 텔레 중이 개변도 하고 단주 전담 공조 장주 생조기 시스다시에 타담면에 지레신 거 대단 somba제반데야 아신라 핀비되는 논다지 마마에 원주 좀바토미 진군 주는 제프들 자와오 당과만 찍으시죠 여러분은 소리서 남아야로기 잘 관계 되는 로메zembr이 전화 기대 존재바 라마초다지 생각나 다도 고송급에 자르는 변이준에 조배서 단지 룬에 준데 디라레시라라레 메진나네 제베드니 된주 조제니 같아도는 다젠고 예술은 니다 선도 이와 메바이 니생감바 제셀라네
Okay, so Rinpoche was saying that he had the opportunity, the great opportunity here to offer a short commentary on the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas. It was a great opportunity for Rinpoche to place imprints in his mind, and of course a great opportunity for all the listeners, everyone who participated here, to place such imprints. Now, even from the title of the text, we see that it says the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. So how do you engage in these texts? Other texts, it is enough to just understand the meaning. But even from the title of the text, we understand that this is something that we have to put into practice. So perhaps sometimes you recite this text as a prayer. Sometimes you have the opportunity to think deeper upon those things. But the most important thing is to put those things into practice. So Rinpoche once again is emphasizing that it's very important we make the commitment, we reach to the point of saying that from this day onward, I will take these things as a practice. So it should not be just mere words, and we should not just be saying, 37 practices, but in actuality, in reality, we should implement this as a practice. Our practice here is the practice of reducing afflictions, of reducing our own self-cherishing, and instead increasing the attitude of cherishing others. And we see that it is through this type of commitment that we are capable of establishing both the benefit of ourselves and others. As we have seen again and again, this verse in Lama Chopa, who says the faults of, compares the faults of self-cherishing and the great development of those who cherish others. So the difference is pretty obvious for all of us to see. If we follow down this path of practice, this will quickly lead to the state of enlightenment. Rinpoche was able of coming here and giving these teachings because he was invited by Dro-Phen Center. So Rinpoche would like very much to thank the center for organizing these teachings and inviting Rinpoche to come and give the teachings. If the center was not here to organize and provide this opportunity for all of us, we would not have the chance to receive this teaching. It is amazing that at this time of degeneration, this time which is a time of violence, and we see so much external violence, and we see so much pride and self-cherishing that become predominant in society, we have the opportunity to come here together and speak about the complete opposite of this. We talk about practices for developing bodhicitta, for generating the mind that cherishes others, and so forth. So it is an incredible opportunity for all of us, and the audience here has created great roots of virtue. It is very important to recognize how rare this opportunity is and really have a great sense of achievement and great sense of joy. Just rejoice that you have received all this, but then please take it a step further. Don't just leave it as I was fortunate enough to receive, to listen to these teachings, but instead make it happen. So put it into practice. So having accumulated all this root of virtue, it is very important now that we dedicate in an appropriate way, and we dedicate for the long living and the increase of the teachings. As we say, the teachings are the source of all happiness and benefit of sentient beings. So please dedicate for the long endurance of the teachings. And of course, dedicate so that all holy beings who uphold, support the teachings, all our gurus and so forth, they all have a very long life. Now, these teachings that were given by our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, after obtaining the state of enlightenment in Dorje Den, starting with the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, have come to us up to now. These are teachings that include Hinayana, Mahayana teachings without any discrimination, and they have all come. We have all received all this. It is important to understand how the Buddhist teachings remain and how we receive the transmitted and the realized teachings. There is a great difference between the transmitted teachings and the realized teachings, because for the realized teachings, we must have individuals who actually put it into practice. So once again, Rinpoche is emphasizing how important it is for us to take this as a practice. So thank you everyone for participating, and thank you to the organizers, and please put it into practice. So with this, we make the dedication.
Tembe Chendanga Danda, Losanje, Temba, Jeju, Labasan de Minza, Dube Soji, Nande, Tadu Shiru, Javesid, Tuden Shuju, Jebe, Taji, Mejun Seje, Jevish, Tende Loa, maybe Demba, Dagi, Lasan David, Membe Dungan, de la Nyunro, Sho.
Rinpoche do chole nambra gyebe nirishe wisho lada miye penjo pongchon ma chawa meba chanchi yido wawa dida tinje chawa na kibra jebe panden namda kibra dunya kyabje changje cheje Gosok Rinpoche dorje changche jeje ngawa sura tinje gele gyazo pesam shengane tekpa chembe sumje samu lebra tobe chen tara ge chen Fubara Gyobo Tuje Drube Tudu Shisu Su Sene Gyada Su Senje Tamje La Son Gone Shiji Soda Tomo Gi Ngodu Ma Liba Jedu Su Yoso Shibi Yegi Choeje Shi Mi Yendo Chamo Gebe cheche tuge jimbe tu losa gebe tenpa gege je ngonje wangpo tuge tamje chena nido chenpo si seche gebe ngangje tenpe tu losa gebe tenpa taje zame kyubo pepe je jambe chundu sekara chunpo pe chedo nashi pupa tem losa gebe tenpa gege je tawa namda taje tale tu gompa neda chundu Namda Gebe Kashin Ju Losa Gebe Tenpa Gege Je Mandu Teba Gyache Tsabe Ge Tede Jeje Gunda Kunkya Tendo Tendo Ngove Son Losa Gebe Tenpa Ge Tangi Sura Mali Kame Do Kansa Chigi Nyamle Tambaru Gebe Jeju Debe Losa Gebe Tenpa Gege Je Lungde Tene Sumgi Chenge Da Debe Kichi Debe Gebe Tenpa Gege Je Chisu Ngende Chile Shishin Do Nando Rinshin Nancho Den Donga Losa Pame Dongsu Ge Losa Gebe Tenpa Gege Lebra Sibe Tongpa Nge Tibo Tabge Dube Dejen Da Nyamche Chebo Gede Losa Gebe Tenpa Gege Je Kebo Sumge Lamge Sume Jo Ngeje Sona Tenso Tamje Tudo Ge Losa Gebe Tenpa Gege Je Dona Palde Lame Kije tembe tambe sante kya tembe jinda ngata tuwa yu losa. Chiji yobo soko bo jir. Lomo jivo lo jiri jivo jivo. Jiri moli sambo sho tado shiji jun. Tabi soji lo tili yobo lo so job. Jimo jiri mo jiri sanji kinsu jivi. Jiri mi ju jivi jilo lo jiri mi jivi.